Communities that surround our churches are in disarray in one way or another, regardless of the status of the church in terms of its socioeconomic condition, its race or ethnic orientation. There are communities that surround our churches that are constantly in some state of flux and change. And in that type of environment, what happens to people is that they typically get disconnected from one another. And when people get disconnected from one another, the assets that people have to bring to community also get disconnected. And what happens is that communities fall into this state of disarray. We see this manifested in so many different ways in many of our communities, particularly in the urban settings, but also in some of the rural settings, and increasingly in the suburban settings, which are beginning to take on suburban characteristics. One way to alleviate this problem is to begin forming partnerships that bring wholeness to communities. And the reason we do partnerships is because all the assets that are necessary for churches to do the work that God has really called us to do in communities are rarely found in the church. It is a very rare instance that one church, through its tithes and offerings, has enough to offer a community to satisfy all the needs of a single community. But the reality is that in almost every community, there are other institutions, other people who have assets that are available if we would only invite people to a place to use them. In my position in Montgomery County, I've been able to begin doing this work not from a church standpoint, but from a government standpoint. And we've acted as government to bring our assets as a catalyst to the rest of the community to help people bring their assets to community. One way we've done this is through something we call the Neighbors Campaign. The Neighbors Campaign is in response to a reality that we found over the last 6 or 8 months that many people are falling into a state of economic crisis because of the economic crisis we're having in our country. The floor to receive federal assistance is $20,000, yet in Montgomery County, we realized that it costs nearly $73,000 for any family to live without public assistance. So there's a precipice, $50,000 precipice that many families are falling off now. And we've identified certain neighborhoods where we know that that's going to be the case. One such neighborhood is Gaithersburg, where what I've done is to begin asking nonprofits, those who are philanthropic, those who provide services, those who are involved in community organizing, along with faith communities, to come together to talk about what it is we could do to make sure that these people have their needs met in a way that's satisfactory for all of us. Churches in particular have stepped up to the plate to offer what they've had. Sometimes in churches we have assets that we don't think we have. Maybe just your interest and your time is important. For instance, in our campaign, we've located Health and Human Services offices in the neighborhoods where people are, and we've decided to deploy people to knock on doors to connect with these people for 2 reasons. One is we want to identify the people who are having the problems and make sure they actually get connected with the resources that they need for emergency services. But we also don't want to waste those door knocks. We've decided that we want to start doing some community organizing, some actual connecting of people together to figure out what assets they have that are good for one another so that we can begin building the neighborhood in such a way that there's sustained growth and sustained wholeness in the community after we've left. Grace Church, for instance, in Gaithersburg, has been in the process for over a year now, renovating Susanna Wesley House, which is a house next to the church. It turns out that it is fabulous meeting space for us. So we've trained nearly 50 people to knock on doors and to connect with various stakeholders in community on behalf of the population that we wish to serve. Had Grace Church not been available in that neighborhood, we would not have been able to do that type of work in the community. Mercy Seat Chapel is a Pan-African congregation in Gaithersburg, where because they live next to the apartments where we're doing much of this work, they've made their church available to us and some of their members available to us to actually go and knock on doors. It's been a fabulous resource for us in that way. And so in bringing things together, we've raised money through a philanthropic nonprofit. We've brought a community organizing entity in to help us understand how to knock on doors and how to develop community. And we're using a service provider where we've located our office to begin doing that work. And now hundreds of people in Gaithersburg who would not have been connected to services are going to be connected to services. And that's just one of at least 5 characteristics of great community partnerships that I've been able to identify in my work. The first one is that there's always a common vision in response to a community need that's necessary. In this case, we identified that there would be some people falling off the economic precipice, and we all knew that that would put an undue strain on everyone in the community, so we decided to act together to do it. Someone, though, needed to catalyze the conversation, and churches are often that catalyst in community. The second is there needs to be a sustained satisfaction of every party in the collaboration self-interest. That is, people have to have a reason to come to the table. And if they don't get that reason satisfied at the table, they won't stay at the table. And it's impossible to maintain a sustainable community effort in that way. So everybody has to bring their own self-interest unabashedly to the table. There's nothing the matter with self-interest in and of itself, only if it becomes selfish to the point that it kills the partnership, that it becomes a negative thing. Also, each party has to bring some useful asset to the community. In our case, in the government, we brought our entire health and human services. Every nonprofit brought their space, their people, their resources. Churches brought their resources and their people. But they're all useful assets when combined, add up to more than doing the simple math. Also, great community partnerships also catalyze other sustainable collaborations between people. When we're done with this, there will be a network on the ground that will enable that community to stay together in a healthy way long after we're gone. And the end goal is to move people from individual disempowerment to a sense of community empowerment. That is, as long as we continue to deliver emergency services to people, it means that they need emergency services. Our job is to sort of work ourselves out of a job through the partnership. That is, making sure that people don't need the services that we provide. And when we've done a great job at doing that, we've been effective in our community partnerships. The key point for me is that all of these things are on what I call the Jesus agenda. If you look at Matthew 28 and Luke 4, this is what Jesus calls us to do. It's how Jesus even identifies himself. And if we are going to be followers of Jesus, we must go where Jesus goes, do what Jesus did. As leaders in the church, it is essential for each pastor to catalyze these kinds of relationships and partnerships to make the communities around our churches look more like the kingdom of God.